Today we're talking about relationships, talking about dating, talking about getting married with two of my favorite relationship experts, Dr. Dianne Stewart. She's a psychologist and professor at Emory University that teaches a unique course called Black Women, Black Love, America's War on African American Marriage. And that course is named after and based on her book by the same name, Black Love, or Black Women, Black Love. Also joining us is board certified psychiatrist and relationship coach, Dr. Ish Major. You've seen him. He's host of Marriage Boot Camp on WeTV, and he's been on a variety of shows trying to help couples work through their relationship issues. And I wanted to have them on after I read an article on NBC.com that really talked about some of the dating advice that social media influencers and these relationship gurus are giving to women and to men, but mostly to women. And these dating experts, as they call themselves, are really telling women some advice that I find to be particularly interesting and not very good advice. And I wanted to check in with my relationship experts. So some of the advice that these so-called gurus are giving to women include encouraging women to turn dating into a game of strategy, to attract a man who's willing to pay all the bills, to spoil his partner with gifts, and to fund their very lavish lifestyle. And I read this article and these comments by these relationship gurus thinking, oh my God, I'm a mother. I have two daughters and a son. So I see this both from the perspective of women, but also from the guy's perspective. And I was talking to a good friend of mine. He's a very successful entertainment executive. He's a showrunner. He's a writer, director. And I hadn't talked to him in a while. And we reconnected recently. And I asked him, how was this long-term relationship that he was in? How was it going? And he says, oh, we broke up. I was kind of shocked to hear that because it seemed like things were going well the last time I talked to him. And he told me that he got a job working on a show with a very big celebrity, an A-lister. And after he told her that he had been hired to work as a director, a writer on this show, she started saying things like, if you want to date me and want me to hang out with you, you've got to start paying my bills. I said, what? Are you serious? He said, yes. She said that the opportunity cost, her opportunity cost. So while on dates with him, she was missing time from work. I don't even know what this woman did, but that therefore he was somehow responsible for paying her. And I'm thinking in my mind, there used to be names for people that demanded money from men in exchange for favors. But he said he had to break up with her because he was willing to give her a little money here and there, pay for dates and do other things, but literally taking on her household bills was absolutely positively out of the question. And I was so glad he made that decision. But apparently women like this ex-girlfriend of his are being told this by dating experts. So when I read that and then I talked to my friend and learned about his story, of course, I needed to talk to Dr. Major and Dr. Stewart because something's wrong with this advice that many, and I do mean millions of women are going to the internet, talking to these so-called influencers, these gurus, and getting this kind of advice. So I have two of my favorite dating and relationship experts joining us in this hour. Dr. Dianne Stewart, I misspoke. I called her a psychologist. She is not. She is a professor of religion and African American studies at Emory University. She's also the author of a really great book called Black Women, Black Love. If you haven't read it, make sure you pick it up. It's a very intriguing book. I just love this book. I've given it to lots of women. Also, Dr. Ish Major, my good buddy, is here. He's host of Marriage Boot Camp on WeTV. He's a board certified psychiatrist and relationship coach. Good to see both of you again, Dr. Major, Dr. Stewart. All right, Dr. Major, Dr. Ish, as you were called. I thought of you immediately when I was reading this article. Then I had this conversation with my friend who said this woman literally told him if he wanted to continue dating her, he had to be willing to basically pay her bills, not just like, a $20 bill. Like he said, major, like her monthly rent. Help us out here. What's going on out here?
She wanted him to put him. She wanted him to put her on retainer.
Basically.
It's Areva. It's rough out there. I mean, it really is, right? Dating has always been a jungle, but now when you distill it down to something that's overtly transactional, you take it from a dating jungle to a dating knife fight out in them streets. And here's the bad news about a knife fight: somebody's gonna get cut. Okay.
But you're a psychiatrist, Dr. Ish. So I need advice
Yeah.
for a medical condition. I might
Right.
go to WebMD. I may go to one of the other, medical sites online, but I'm still going to go to a doctor. I'm going to go get an MRI, a CT scan. I'm not going to just rely on what I see on the internet, but some of these quote unquote influencers,
Right.
dating gurus on the internet, they're giving women really bad advice. And my friend's ex
Yeah.
apparently, is following some of this advice.
Yeah. Well, here's what I'll say about that, right? When you take the advice from clowns, you can't be surprised when your life turns into a circus, right? So, but what this tells us is, right? People are getting their information in a new way. People are consuming their content in a new way, and they feel like they have a relationship with these influencers because they watch them every day, right? And so they feel like they're a trusted source. We used to feel like whatever we saw on TV we could trust. Now it's whatever we can see on our device. So I can't fault them for trusting, but I would like them to get that information from a much more reliable source as opposed to somebody who's out there slugging it out, getting their butt kicked in the dating jungle just like you, right? The problem we're having now is that people feel like because they have done something, it qualifies them to teach you how to do something, right? Just because you had a heart attack doesn't mean you can do open heart surgery, right?
Yeah, you and I did it the wrong way, apparently. You went to medical school, I went to law school. We didn't need those degrees after all.
Right. Exactly. So that's what happened. It tells me that they're desperate for advice, they're desperate for information. It tells me that they are not finding the love they want, and they're literally now opening themselves up to ideas, whatever seems more popular.
And Dr. Stewart, there's a concept out there called the provider mindset. And some of these influencers, as Dr. Ish said, they're selling advice, whether they're qualified to do so or not. They have courses, they have ebooks, they have, online classes. And the whole provider mindset is, hey, woman, you're so special. You should be out looking for a provider.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think Dr. Itch already kind of laid the foundation for that. We are in a culture where everything is for sale, including love. And those traditional ideas about a provider husband and a nurturing and caretaking wife are still deeply embedded in our culture. There are other ideas out there. They just don't get circulated as widely as these ideas. And so, yes, this is exactly what's happening. I think it's dangerous. I think it's harmful. It doesn't lead us to have conversations about partnership models that are based on love and reciprocity. Those perspectives are getting sidelined in these conversations in the public square.
Yeah, Dr. Ish, we've had this conversation before. There's some men out there that talked about the high quality man, right?
Mm-hmm.
It introduced that term and made men think in the same way that these experts or so-called experts are telling women to think. So the man, made himself the king, and like, he was high quality man, so he was able to attract and demand certain things from women. Is this just the flip side of that kind of Kevin Samuelson philosophy about dating?
Yeah. So yes, and right. So I think yes, it's the flip side of that. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? If you're gonna, right, if this is what it takes for me to be with a high quality man, well, this is what a high quality woman looks like. But now we've got to really drill down on what is our definition of quality, right? So for guys, you need to understand that your power doesn't lie in your pocket or in your penis, right? If that's the only place you can go to get your power from, well, I hate to tell you, there's a lot of guys who have a penis, right? Most actually, right? And for women, your value does not lie only in your vagina, right? If that is the only thing that you're bringing to the table of value, then you're going to have some problems, because every single woman I've ever seen in the clinic, they all have vaginas and they all work the exact same way, right? And so now what we're doing is, now it's becoming a math problem, right? So here's why this math doesn't make sense, Areva. Most people, the average salary in this country is $56,000. That is roughly $20 an hour, right? You can support yourself, you can have a home, a car, and get all your bills paid. Now, these women are asking that dude to double up on his expenses. The only thing more expensive than rent today is 2 rents today, okay?
I'm so glad you said that, because another conversation I had with a friend was about her daughter dating a teacher. Yeah. Now, a teacher is an honorable profession. We know this man has at least a bachelor's degree, probably a master's degree. Right. He's got a certificate as a teacher. He's gone through some, formal training. And, being a teacher is a good job. But it was almost like she was explaining to me, he doesn't make a lot of money, but he's good to her. And I was like, teachers make decent money. Now, we as a country could pay them a lot more. Right. But you're right. If the expectation is this guy's supposed to fund some lavish lifestyle, of course you can't do that on a teacher's salary.
You can't do it on a teacher's salary. You can't do it on 50 or 60 grand. You may be able to do it on 100. So now let's look at what the math says, Areva. We know that 9 out of every 100 people in this country make 100 grand or more. That's 9 humans. That's not all 9 men. So now you've got about 4 or 5 guys making 100 grand, and you've got 90 or 95 women competing for their attention. How is that math going to work for you, right? I don't know a whole lot about math, but I know I would much be a part of the 5 than the 95 who's looking to get picked, right?
Yeah. So okay. So the math doesn't work out. There's just not enough people, is what you're saying, men in particular, that make the kind of money that can allow them to take care of themselves. Right. And then turn around and pay the bills or fund this lavish lifestyle, whether it's trips or whatever. And I wonder if you're the kind of woman that's approaching a guy like that, does that send, what kind of message is that sending to a man about you and your values?
Well, it sends a very clear message about why we're here, right? And I don't have a problem with that, with the transactional nature of it. Relationships have always been transactional to a certain degree. It's simply been more inherently implied, right? There's always been a wealth for beauty exchange as long as there has been. There's always been a wealth for youth exchange as long as there have been. We're talking 1940s and 50s and 60s. There's always been a stability for division of labor exchange. I'm going to go out here and work these docks or work this warehouse, and you're going to hold things down at the house, right? We've always had these roles in this division of labor, but as our roles have gotten more blurred, right? As women have started to out-earn their male counterparts because they're out-educating their male counterparts, those lines are now getting blurred, right? As 70% of our African-American homes are being headed up by single African-American women, those guys are like, well, I'm not really sure where I fit in or why I need you. And every other song is talking about your fiercely independent woman. And so women are really saying, well, what is it I actually need you for? So somebody's got to come to an agreement about what it is we want and what it is we think we deserve.
So one of the things that, is the premise of some of these gurus' advice is that every woman wants a rich man, right? Is that everybody wants a man, every woman wants a man that can, lavish them with gifts and give them this very expensive lifestyle. In your practice, having seen the hundreds, if not thousands of couples and women, is that even true? Is that premise true to begin with?
Areva, when you marry or hook up for money, you're going to earn it every single day. Okay. So there are a lot of women in my practice who have been there and done that. And now they just want the real thing. Right. Mm-hmm. Because that was
let me just step back. Just if you kind of gave, just percentage wise, I know it won't be exact, but is that the prevailing norm of most of the women that you see, is that, they start out with this notion that they want a rich man?
It is not. It's really not, right? And it depends on your age group, right? It depends on who you follow on Instagram and who you follow on TikTok. That is informing you about who you should be looking for and who you should be dating, right? And so if we've got a 22-year-old, well, that may be what she's looking for, right? Because that's what her media and her content is informing her of where she should be. But if you've got a woman who's a little more mature, right, who's got some of those things on her own, well, now actually what she wants is a friend and a life partner, right? Somebody who she can share things with and be intimate and vulnerable with. So I think you really got to break it down, not just by numbers, but also by age range, right? Because our values change. What I wanted at 25, I don't want now, right? The things that would turn me on when I was 20 or 30, those things don't do it for me anymore. So you've got to allow for yourself to grow over time.
But I hear what you're saying about the younger women who may be watching their friends or watching celebrities on Instagram or TikTok. But there are a generation of women who were taught, and I'm not talking about 22-year-olds. I'm talking about 40, 50, 60-year-old women who grew up in households where they were taught that as the woman, they were supposed to be taken care of. Sure. The man was supposed to make more money. The man, and even if he didn't make more money, whatever he made, he was supposed to spend it on them, and that they weren't supposed to ever pay for dates. They weren't supposed to pay for vacations or trips or any of that. And if you didn't have that, that somehow that man was less than. Like you didn't have the prize mate. You had, something less than. And then men were told, men have been told in many households, many cultures, many traditions that a real man doesn't let his woman pay for a meal or pay for a date. So there is this indoctrination that has occurred over the decades that causes even mature couples or mature individuals, I think, to have some of the same, ideas that maybe the 22-year-old that's seeing the bling bling on TikTok. Now, maybe the 50-year-old is not on TikTok and is not seeing it there, but maybe they've grown up in an environment where, the man was no good if he couldn't pay your bills or pay for your lifestyle. So I don't think we can just, say that this is a millennial or Gen Z thing, because I'm talking about my friend who I gave the example of, who's a, entertainment executive. Sure. He's in his early 50s, and this woman he was dating is in her late 40s or early 50s. So she was the one saying he had to pay her bills in order to date him. Dr. Major said that men are natural born hunters. So women shouldn't, be surprised when they're chasing them. They shouldn't make themselves too difficult to catch, but also they shouldn't accept what she calls low effort dates, like getting coffee. So now if a man asks you to get coffee, according to this so-called expert, that's a low effort date. And as a woman, you're a queen, you're a princess, you're a high quality woman, you shouldn't be accepting that date. What do you say to that?
Yeah, you know what? A couple things, right? So I have no problem whatsoever with women raising their level of expectation and their standards for what they will and will not accept when it comes to dating. Because let's just be perfectly honest, there is a lot of garbage out there, a lot, right? So I have no problem with that. I think what's getting confused is in the message, right? So on the surface, well, this sounds overtly materialistic. This sounds super transactional. A little Kanye I can hear playing in the background talking about gold diggers. I can hear all of this stuff. But if I look at the psychology underneath it, right? What I think I'm hearing is, hey, when I say I want you to take care of me and some of my bills, I want you to prove to me that you value me and that you cherish me, right? When I say I want you to...
Wait a minute, Dr. Major. And I'll have you jump in, Dr. Stewart. If a man said to a woman, I want you to help pay some of my bills, would we as a society say, oh, this is just, his way of asking you to say that you cherish him?
Of course not. Well, that's not right, because that's not what we've been taught. No, we have very traditional values. A lot of us still do, especially in our community, our African American community, very traditional roles, very traditional values. But when I hear a woman say, I want to be chased, I want to be courted, I want to be wined and dined, I want these extravagant things. What I hear her pleading for, out of exasperation is that, hey, I want to know that you want me, that I'm really, really the one, right? Help prove that to me, because there's so many options and we're bombarded by so many different ways to divide our attention. I need to know that I'm your girl, right? So help prove that to me. That's a
But Dr. Stewart, but wait a minute. Black women in particular, we have fought to, get into some of the best schools, to get advanced degrees, to become professionals, to be accepted in the workplace for our brilliance, our talents. So if we do all of that work, we become CEOs or, college professors or whatever, then is there something inconsistent with then saying to a man, I want you to pay my bills?
There could be, there could be. But as Dr. Ish said, those traditional values around marriage and the role of a husband, the role of a wife, are deeply rooted in our cultural expectations when looking for permanent partners. That's the problem. And human beings are well equipped to live duplicitously, to deal with cognitive dissonance. So we can be that powerhouse woman in the workplace and still want to come home and be provided for by a man. And some of those ideologies are deeply ingrained in our religious institutions and the doctrines that we're taught through religion. So they're there. The problem I have is we act as if there aren't other values or other ways of pursuing relationships. And those values, those traditional patriarchal values, get promoted. But when you look at a lot of Black households, for example, even when couples hold those values, those households often have to live more egalitarian lives, and share the financial responsibility, because most Black men can't do that kind of providing, don't have the wealth to be able to do that. So even when those values are cherished or upheld, we often find that we have to compromise those values. And my worry is that when we don't have a more robust and dynamic understanding of varied roles that husbands and wives can play, and we feel let down because we're not achieving that patriarchal standard, what can that do to a relationship?
Yeah, and I worry, Dr. Major, how do we start to break? Like I always tell people, I reject the patriarchy. How do we start really rejecting it and changing how we teach our young women and young men so that, we don't have folks falling prey to this, popcorn psychology? I'm sure that's what you guys call it, in the psychiatry world, where folks are telling you that, the man is no good unless he can fund your lavish lifestyle. And this woman that broke up with my friend, genuinely good guy, right, hardworking, good values. I mean, will do anything. I mean, just a prize of a guy. And yet this woman is like, dude, if you can't pay all my bills, it's over.
Right. Yeah. Well, you've got to reevaluate your value system, right? And everybody's got a right to prioritize that however you want, right? If money is your top priority, right, and being taken care of financial stuff, well, so be it. But understand, when you were creating that kind of dynamic now, right, you're also lessening your psychological safety in that dynamic, right? And for a woman, when she feels psychologically safe, she can feel love. When that is not there, when you're in a situation where you have 90% of the women chasing 10% of the guys, there's no psychological safety in that, right? Because now he knows he's in high demand, right? There's nothing stopping him from welching on the deal and trading you in for a younger model, trading you in for a more youthful model. What does he do when you gain weight? What does he do when you get old? All of these things come into play, right? And so you've got to figure that out. I think how we get back to basics, Areva, is we start teaching folks about what it really means to be vulnerable, right? Psychologically, emotionally vulnerable. What's the thing you're really asking for, right? Because the money represents something, right? Whereas in psychology, that's an object, right? What is that? What does the rent symbolize for you, right? Commitment, stability, right? Does getting that rent paid every single month, does that finally fill that father void you grew up without? Right? What is it? So let's talk about that, right? Let's peel the layers back, because we all have so much armor on now, right? We're all so tough, and we're all too cool for school. Nobody wants to admit that we still need each other, right? I want to be loved. I want to give it, and I want to receive it. And let me tell you how, right? Because when you present financial stability, that means something to me, right? When you show up as a vulnerable woman, right, with in full command of your emotions, right, and able to guide me through some of those emotional waters, that represents something for me. Can we talk about the thing that's underneath the superficiality? I think as long as we can keep getting underneath that, peeling back the layers of those onions, then I think we can create a space where there's some psychological safety. Because the other way, right, the way they're trying to do it now does not foster an environment for monogamy. It does not foster good behavior, and it does not foster long-term relationships, right? When you are in a transactional situation, you will never, ever stop looking for your better deal.
And it's leaving a lot of Black women without a mate, because as you said earlier, the math doesn't work out. Dr. Major made it pretty clear. The math ain't mathing. And the average person, the average American is making $50,000, $60,000 a year. So if you are one of those women, particularly if you're one of those Black women that's looking for this man to fund your lavish lifestyle, you're not likely to find them. So what does that mean for us as a Black community around issues of marriage and, population growth, having families, having kids? And Black women are waiting for this mythical Prince Charming with this big bank account.
Yeah, and unfortunately, some are making the argument that they should turn to white men and other men to afford them those privileges, that pedestal that they think that they deserve and should have. I have no problem with the dating choices people make, but when it's Black men are irredeemable, there's no way that we can solve this problem this way. Let's turn elsewhere. As you know, my book argues that this is America's unrecognized civil rights issue. And one of the main foundations of it is Black impoverishment and wealthlessness, stolen wealth. And so on one level, we have to make these issues a civil rights issue and argue that the kinds of attention that we expect policymakers to give to other issues, whether it's educational disparities, health disparities, food deserts, you name it, we have to give this kind of attention to these problems that I call forbidden Black love. So that's one. We're not going to address it without bringing it to the level of policymakers and raising this as a civil rights issue. But I will say something else, Areva. I think it's an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity for us to rethink what it means to be a person, to be a man, a woman, a husband, a wife. Because if we can diversify, let's face it, we have these strong patriarchal values that are rooted in this country around marriage and household and family building. But we've also come through several feminist revolutions. We've also come through major culture wars, and some people have become convinced. So my feeling is that this gives us an opportunity to raise questions about our diversity, our talents, our interests as women, as men, as husbands and wives, and to be more flexible and more fluid about the roles we can play. That is a part of our psychological safety and satisfaction as well. Being able to live into our likes and our dislikes, our skills and our talents. And I think this problem of being up against this wall of not being able to find those wealthy Black men or wealthy men, period, to finance the good lives that we want as women. I mean, I don't hold to that perspective at all, but I think it should make us raise questions about whether these rigid patriarchal standards are really serving us.
Well, I think most of us, particularly women like you and I, would say absolutely positively not. And not just in the context of dating or marriage or families. I mean, there's so many ways that we as women, particularly Black women, are disadvantaged by patriarchy. I mean, we could just, could spend hours just talking about that. But you said something very interesting, Dr. Major. She said that maybe Black women who say the math ain't mathing with Black men think that there's some panacea out there with white men or Asian men or, Europeans or, someone else outside of the Black males. And that if they start dating those types of men, they'll find, this, let's call them sugar daddy or, baller or whatever term you want to use. Is that realistic, and how dangerous is that for, again, our community?
Well, it's dangerous in the fact that it's just simply not going to get you what you want, right? You're creating an environment where you're setting yourself up for perpetual disappointment, perpetual shortcomings, and perpetually being unfulfilled in your romantic life, right? Which is a big part of who we are, right? Because think about this. Let's say, Areva, that you've got all the money in the world, you've got the biggest, baddest house on the hill, you got the biggest car, the nicest clothes, right? And you're the most beautiful version of yourself possible, but you have a horrible relationship with the person you love or the one who's supposed to be loving you back. You're going to say life is pretty awful. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, on the other hand, let's say you got no money, you out here riding a 10-speed bicycle right? Or a scooter, okay? And you have no idea, at the end of every month, you got way more month than you got money, right? But that person who's loving you, you are in it. And you are loving them back. You're going to say, you know what? We don't have much, but what we got is enough, right? And
okay, wait. Okay. Where is the middle ground?
Studies show. Now, this is science. This is my opinion. This is science. Studies show if you've got the one thing, all the other stuff looks very, very doable, because the money don't feed our soul, right? That doesn't feed my
no. But let me ask you this: what does the science say about the middle ground? So I'm with you. We've seen that time and time again. Super wealthy people who are miserable, who go through men, women every 6 months or so. But is there a middle ground where you can have people come together? You don't have to be the richest man in the world. The woman doesn't have to be, drop dead gorgeous, but they come together and they, bring certain things to the relationship. And they, maybe it's their $50,000 a piece, or one has 50 and one has 70. Sure. But, they can survive. They can meet their basic needs. They're not living in the streets. They do have transportation. They have health insurance. They have the basic stuff that Americans want. How do we get there?
I think the happy medium is what Dr. Stewart was talking about, right? We've got to give ourselves permission to go grab our happy and let go of the thing that's no longer serving us, such as these super rigid gender roles and these super rigid traditional roles that we are just not cut out to perform. That's not the world in which we're living anymore, right? And so we've got to give ourselves permission to go grab the other thing, right? Maybe you are not looking outside of your race, right? If you look to date somebody outside of your race, you're going to grab your happiness. That doesn't mean you're rejecting your Blackness. It doesn't, right? If you want to be with a man who makes 50 grand a year, and you guys have had an adult conversation about what all we bring into the relationship and why that is of value and why that matters, choosing that piece of happiness doesn't mean you're rejecting your values that you grew up with, right? It means you're living in the moment and you're giving yourself permission to go be happy. But as a community, we don't do that well. Right. And we hold each other hostage. We hold each other prisoner, because if you don't live up to what my standard of what it means to be a man, a woman, or in a couple in a relationship, if that doesn't fit, then we're going to discount you. Right. And as Black folks, we're not just going to discount you. We're going to shame you all the way out that door.
Yeah, that's the part that gets really difficult. You're right. It's the shaming. It's the community shame. Right. It's the embarrassment. It's the woman saying, my daughter dates a teacher, but he has a side hustle. Like, okay, I didn't ask you that, but why can't he just be a teacher?
You got to excuse, right? You're teaching children to be better humans, but because the job doesn't have enough clout, I have to make an excuse for it, and I have to qualify it and justify it. What does that say about who we are?
Yeah, that's a problem, Dr. Stewart. And so I know you teach this, and we say we want to reject the patriarchy, but give us 2 or 3 things we can do concretely to really reject the patriarchy?
Well, one is read. We need to read. We don't like
Turn
to
off
read.
the television and get off the internet and read a book.
Read.
What about an audio book, Dr. Stewart? I mean, do I have to read it?
Get some information. We now have tons of Black scholars, great scholars globally who can help us with this. One of the things we have to come to understand is that patriarchy harms Black men also. See, we think it only harms Black women, or we only talk about it as harming Black women. It harms Black boys and Black men. And one book I recommend to the entire audience, it's a very accessible book, is Bell Hooks' The Will to Change. She really works Black men through this and Black women. So I say we need to read. We need to have different kinds of conversations like what you are hosting right now in these social media spaces with experts who can help us. We need to be open. And I tell you, the other thing that I think is really hard, and this is what I'm working on a volume 2, and I'm really going to deal more with the religious doctrine and how that undergirds these patriarchal ideas that we just don't want to let go. I mean, just for an example, those, what we call them household codes in the New Testament, those Pauline scriptures about how wives must be submissive to their husbands and husbands must love their wives and slaves do this to the masters. These communities didn't think they were writing manuals for all Christians of all time. They didn't even think the world was going to last till the end of the week. They were literally trying to survive under empire, truly believing that Jesus was going to come back tomorrow. Tomorrow. But we're reading these passages as if this was God's way of laying out how husbands and wives should relate to one another forever. So we need to rely on our.
Oh, I'm so out of time. I'm so out of time, Dr. Stewart. You guys.
We need to rely on our religious studies scholars to help us with understanding that we can be more flexible, more nuanced in our reading of scripture. And so
we always have the best conversations with the both of you. I've got to have you back. We got to continue this conversation. I love that concept of challenging our religious beliefs as a way of addressing patriarchy. Thank you both so much for your time. Always a pleasure being in conversation with you both. Love both of you.